Thank you, and welcome back to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 77th episode this week, where we'll be recapping the Patriots' losses the last couple of weeks versus the Seahawks and the Jets, as well as previewing this upcoming matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers, as well as talking about some news around the NFL. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram /X at past 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day. Kevin, so Patriots, I know we weren't on last week, some scheduling issues, and I was traveling. So Patriots played great week one, got a win versus Cincinnati, and then followed up with a really tight loss versus Seattle, where they're winning most of the game in the second half and then just couldn't make a stop, couldn't do anything on offense. And then so they played well to an extent, but got a tough loss, and then they just absolutely blown out on Thursday night versus the Jets. They lost 24-3. If you watch the game, it felt like they lost 55-3. So what were your thoughts of the past couple of weeks? I will be focusing this episode more on the Jets game than the Seahawks, but overall the past couple of weeks, what have your thoughts been?
Yeah, I think overall thoughts have been kind of slowly starting to get where we expected them to kind of be.
Yep.
And I think watching the Bengals play the last 3 weeks, you kind of think, and like we said going into the first week, the Bengals started off slow. They don't really play well out of the gate, and they had some other kind of things to contend with. Chase holding out for most of the camp, Higgins being out, just injuries kind of overall, and kind of Joe Burrow getting used to his wrist injury. I think with the turnovers you've seen from him the last few weeks, it he usually isn't that kind of free with the ball. So it could be
Yeah.
something maybe with his grip or not kind of having that hand strength right now, getting kind of back to 100% strength if he can. So and the Seahawks, I think you saw some coaching mistakes pop in, clock management, and Bill was one to mention this off the bat, where you saw one of the big ones was going into the half where they had the ball 55 seconds. They had not thrown the ball for 100 yards the whole game, and they're intending on trying to throw the ball to get down the field in 55 seconds. It's not going to happen. You might as well kill the clock there. And that ended up costing them time. And the fact what they did to try and end out the game with taking a really questionable sack there by Brissett, forcing a longer field goal. Again, it was a missed block why the block why it happened, but who knows? Maybe if it's a shorter kick, he's thinking something different, not thinking maybe I have to get this guy instead. I don't know what, but
Yeah, maybe,
um,
and also the kicker, maybe he tries and kick with a higher angle. Again, maybe
mhm,
it's still blocked, but
yeah.
when it's further out, you have to kick with the lower angle and you're
Mhm.
higher risk of getting blocked too.
Yeah, and then the Jets was a complete shit show. It was not good. It was everything that you expected and more. And they were looked that they were not coached. It looked like they were not ready for this game. It wasn't just like the offensive line was getting beat. They looked like they had no idea what they were doing out there. It was basically like a turnstile
Yeah.
where anyone could just rush them, and they didn't know who was protecting who. That's not a player issue. That's a coaching issue where they don't know who their protections are. There's confusion along the line. And I get you have some players that there was a bunch of injuries throughout the game. You have people not starting that usually are there, but you have to kind of foresee that and have that coached up and have the next man up. And they didn't have that ready. Plus, you saw on defense missed tackling,
Yep.
missed assignments, blowing the edge, not containing the edge on rushing, rushing past the quarterback. Things that you don't see on a Patriots defense, everything was happening there. Missed
Yep.
assignments, missed tackles, not setting the edge, missing containment, and just really sloppy play. And it's evident why the Patriots on DVOA are ranked 28th in defense this year.
Yeah.
They just have not been playing well, and I don't think their
And
scheme should be
I
playing
think
well
it's
either.
too like this last game was probably a big reason why they rank so low. Like game
Mhm.
one, they played really well. Game two, run D was excellent, pass D wasn't
They
good.
were eaten alive in game two,
And then game
and then
three, both
mhm.
run and pass was terrible.
Yeah.
But I think too the Thursday night games, the short turnaround, what we've traditionally seen last decade or so is typically the teams that are either more talented, where there's an extreme gap in talent, win, or there's an extreme gap in coaching. Just because in a short week you can't really coach too much. So
Mhm.
unless you're as a coach you exploit something that you could really think you can take advantage of in that shortened week, but most of the time it's due to severe gaps in talent. And then this week, I don't think I know teams are, or a lot of people are picking the Jets to make the playoffs, but I don't think the Jets are a top team in the NFL. And even from a coaching standpoint, Robert Saleh, do you think he's a top coach? He's 20 and 34 in his 3+ years as NFL head coach. I know that it's a divisional opponent where you know your opponent very well compared to non-divisional teams, but the short weeks are tough, but you never want to see something like you saw this past Thursday.
Yep. So kind of getting into the because we got a lot of comments about this. I think it'd be easier just to kind of go down offense than defense
Yeah.
and not really get anything specific for each game, just kind of overall thoughts. Um, so again, Mondre has been there, kind of workhorse the first two games. Was really kind of didn't really see much of him the in the Jets game. He did get hurt. He did come back eventually, but then only played a little bit. They didn't run the ball that much, and that kind of gets me into
Andy fumbled.
um, and he fumbled. Yeah,
Yeah, he's
so that's
fumbled
three
three
straight
straight games.
fumbles. He had fumble issues 2 years ago. He kind of put that aside last year,
Yeah.
for the most part, and then it seems like it's back here. Two.
And with those 2 years ago too, the thing that the first half of the year wasn't that much of a issue. Like I know his rookie year, I believe he had a fumble in one of his first games. He didn't play the next couple
Miami
games.
game.
What?
It was
The
a
Miami
Miami
game?
game, right?
Okay. And then so the second year he was great the first half of the year, but he when Damian Harris got hurt, he essentially became their workhorse. Three down back. He was their leading receiver in receptions. And then as the year got on, he got more and more worn down. And that's when you started to see drops that you didn't see in the first half of the year when he was receiving. And that's when you also started to see the fumbles as well. So again, it's only 3 games. He should be fresh because he didn't really play a bunch in the preseason. And it's only 3 games in. But when you're in the backfield, or even if you're not rushing it 40 times a game, if you're still going out for routes, if you're blocking, if you're running 40 times a game, you're going to start getting worn down. And it's only week 3. I know he is our best playmaker, but that's something that it's going to be interesting to see. A couple years ago when he was a workhorse and just kept getting the ball more and more, that's when you started seeing those issues. And he's already had the fumbles this early in the season.
Yep, and the amount of snaps he's playing is also besides the Jets game was also kind of insane and
Yeah.
not sustainable for
And
a
and
running
you have
back at
a
all.
capable backup in Antonio Gibson too.
Hmm.
So it's not like it's just Mondre and then practice squad, undrafted free
Hmm.
agents. You have a capable guy. And I think
Yep.
you started to see that a little bit in the Seattle game where they started putting in Gibson more and more. And then again, they didn't abandon the run. So couldn't really tell too much from this Jets game. But
Hmm. Yeah, so I wanted to get into again the offensive line play. I don't think there's really much to talk about other than it was just terrible.
atrocious.
It was really bad. Even David Andrews in the Jets game I thought looked pretty bad.
Yep.
He was on the injury report last week, so I don't know if maybe he just wasn't 100%. But he did not look good. And he is the best guy on the line. The most dependable best player right now that they have, and if
Yeah.
he's not playing well, the whole line's gonna suffer. And you could tell that.
Yeah,
Um,
just one thing about the O line. I'm not sure if you're going to transition to something else, but
mhm,
this is something that we talked about a lot on Twitter at the time, and then I think we talked about it a little bit on our podcast as well. But just I know they have some deficiencies in skill on the offensive line, especially with the injuries, how they were down to the third string left tackle, third string left guard, or they were down to their fourth string left tackle and third string left guard at some point during the Jets game.
mhm,
But they I wonder if part of it too is just having no cohesion because they kept shuffling the offensive line throughout all of camp. There would be a different combination pretty much every day and every week. And one thing traditionally what you see with offensive lines are a lot of the ones that have played together long, they know each other, they know what the others are doing, and they can trust that what the person next to them is going to be picking up the right guy. They know they kind of can anticipate, especially if it's zone or if you're going to be blocking. If there's two people rushing gap, you know which gap
mhm,
to go, which player to get to. And I wonder if that lack of cohesion, that amount of shuffling, is contributing to part of the offensive line issues. Where we even saw Michael Lenu, who is an elite guard, is a very good right tackle. The last 2 weeks, he's been awful
mhm.
at right tackle. And I wonder if part of it was he was at guard, now he's at right tackle. Does he know what Leighton Robinson's doing? Does he know what the tight end that's on his side, if they're chipping the right guy? And you see him going for the wrong guy. And I'm wondering if part of that is if they practice the same rotation all summer, with when you at right tackle, Leighton, Sin at guard, Andrews at center, Sal before he got hurt at left guard, and then you're just trying to figure out that left tackle. If it's just one position that you're trying to figure out, maybe the offensive line would look better. But since they kept shuffling everything, City Sal at right guard, now he's at left guard, and back to right, then back to left, Leighton Robinson, center, left guard, right guard, etc. You don't really know what the person next to you is doing, and I'm really wondering if that's a big issue why they're at where they're at right now on the offensive line.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big thing. That I think I can't remember if we tweeted or was
We
me
tweet.
texting
I
you.
know for certain we tweeted about it. I couldn't remember if we talked about it on the pod or not.
Well, I was gonna say just the coach in general, where
Yeah,
everyone
that
makes
too.
this big thing about Scott Peters, right?
Yeah,
His whole kind of technique and all his teaching, how it changes the world and it's this greatest thing since sliced bread. But Scott Peters had the chance to be the offensive line coach for the Cleveland Browns after their offensive line coach left, and they didn't hire him, and that's when the Patriots ended up hiring him. So, is he an actual really good coach? Does he know what he's doing? I'm just asking the questions. I honestly don't know. I'm not the
yeah,
one there every day. And the same questions we're asking about Troy Brown. Is he a bad coach? Does he know what he's actually doing on the wide receiver front? He's
yeah,
a great player, but can he actually coach? And that's the same thing with Scott Peters. Is he teaching the right things? They didn't look prepared at all,
yeah,
and they didn't look like they were ready for that game at all. So I put that squarely on him and AVP. And the big
yeah,
thing, I'm going to jump to AVP actually right
yeah,
now before getting to Brissett, um, is I still don't have any confidence in him. I don't know if I've really mentioned that much
yeah,
in the past, other than just not knowing. So that they're more being like a we'll see what you get. I also not really excited just by having like the 10th man at the altar finally be the one to choose you.
yeah,
But just the things that we've seen with his scheme, it just doesn't seem it seems like he's very green, like he doesn't know what he's doing, at least in the play calling front, where his route schemes are heavily at least 10 to 15 yards down the field past route runs. And this offensive line, at night, you don't have to be a genius to realize this. This offensive line cannot block for more than 3 seconds. They have one of the worst kind of pressure rates
yeah. They
uh,
have the third worst.
among the league. When that happens, and you look at New Orleans with Clint Kubiak, where they also do not have a good offensive line, but their offense hasn't looked terrible because they know how to scheme things open and get things open quick. They know how to do different bubble screens and different quick routes and having the play action and actually run the ball, actually have a play action with that. The Patriots have established a run. The problem with what they've done is that they've been running the regular downhill routes that they normally run, the old kind of Patriots scheme, and they're running a stretch or a boot play action, and they've never actually run that successfully. So when you're running that, the teams know, and there's a reason why they're getting blown up on all their play actions, and why Jacoby Brissett was saying, "Oh, it's like they have a tell why they know what we're doing." The tell is that you've never actually run a successful stretch play on the West Coast scheme. You've been running a downhill play, but your play actions are on those stretch plays. It's just not, it doesn't make any
Yeah,
sense. Like I'm not an offense coordinator. I'm not a defense coordinator. I know you don't do that.
yeah.
And it's just you see that, and you see like
And the
it.
pressure rates on the play action is insane.
Mhm,
The amount of time from snap to pressure is I think 1.6 seconds, 1.7 seconds, which is insane.
mhm,
Like you would expect that the amount of time, like maybe once if you just you don't fake out the guy and they just rush you, but for the most part, you're expecting that running the ball and then play action is going to force the rushers to it might be run. I have to contain, I have to hold. So you would expect there to be more time to throw, but it's actually almost a full second less time to throw.
mhm. Yeah. So there's that big problem. There's the Pop Douglas where after the first game, even the second game,
The
the
second
first two
game.
games, they
Yeah,
didn't really
two
get him
catches for 12
involved.
yards.
Yeah, didn't get him involved in the offense. He is besides Stevenson, he's the biggest playmaker that you have on offense, besides maybe Marcus Jones. And he's not going to be
And
playing.
Bourne when Bourne comes back.
Yeah. And you did nothing to get him the ball. where again, you don't have the greatest line in the world. There's ways to get him involved. You saw that kind of in the Jets game, but it took 2 games to realize that, hey, I need to get this guy involved, and I need to do scheme up these different plays. You
Yep.
don't realize that after the first quarter, saying this guy has gotten no touches, he can impact the game. And you do the things that you did in the third game, the bubble screens, you have the run, you have the different kind of quick slants or in cuts, out cuts, things that really kind of short yardage things that he can make people miss and get the yards after a catch. It feels like the scheme that he's running and the coaching that he's doing isn't conducive for the players that they have. And all off season, they were saying, "Oh, we need to make sure that we fit our scheme to the players." And it seems like he's trying to fit the players to the scheme,
Yeah.
which isn't the right thing to do. Where you don't go running those 15-yard routes when you know you can't protect for the 15 yards, and you
At
don't
least,
go
at least, yeah. As the
right
season goes
now.
on and your offensive line shows that it can hold up, then you can start doing that or
Hmm.
start slowly bringing it in. But
Yeah.
right now, especially the first 3 weeks, even in the preseason, it's not like it's something new that week 2, week 3, oh, this is a major issue. You've known this pretty much since the camp.
Hmm.
Offensive line was the Patriots' biggest issue outside of possibly quarterback the last couple of years. And you could argue quarterback was a big issue because of the offensive line.
Hmm.
So this is nothing new for this team and coaching staff. This is something that they should know.
Yep. And then there's another thing I want to get to, but I want to get into it during the questions around the league because it relates to another kind of quarterback around the league.
Okay,
So I'll hit that then.
sounds
Anything
good.
else on AVP before we just talk about Brissett real quick?
No, just his offense seems very vanilla and very predictable. So I'm hoping it's early on in the season, and since it is incorporating somewhat of a new offense, that maybe he feels that the players, since a lot of the players are from the old regime per se, knowing the old offense, that maybe he doesn't feel that it's ready yet to start incorporating some of those new plays, which is why it looks as vanilla as it does. So trying to hold out hope that as the season goes on, it'll get better and better. But again, we don't know. But
The
the
problem with
way it's
that is
progressing
that
right
you've never
now,
seen on the Cleveland Browns a very high end offense where they're doing innovative things
yeah,
and you're like, I need to emulate this. I need to be the Cleveland Browns. You don't see that. You see that with the 49ers. You see it with the Ravens.
yeah,
Not the Ravens, the Rams. The Ravens, you don't go saying anything that for.
yeah,
You see that with the 49ers. You see it with the Rams. You see it with down in New Orleans right now,
yeah.
besides the last game. And you kind of see it throughout a few different areas where you're like, I need this guy. This guy's innovative. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to scheme things up. You even see it with, again, I think Josh McDaniels is a really great offense coordinator, one of the best
Yeah.
ones in the league. You didn't see it as much, but he did sprinkle things in where some people were trying to take things from him there.
Yeah.
Anything
One thing on
else?
AVP is the way it's progressing right now, it's looking like if the offense is as bad as it is right now the entire season, I wouldn't be shocked if he's gone and is a scapegoat for why the season isn't as good. And if that's the case, the Patriots will be on to their fifth offensive coordinator in the last 5 years.
Yep. No, I would 100% agree where he is going to be the first one to go.
Yeah.
And I think after next year, if it still continues, then it's going to be interesting because the finger pointings are going to get really hot where that's what happens when you have this collaborative effort where it's not one guy that's there saying I'm making all the decisions. It's going to be a lot of finger pointing, and you know that the person's going to I'll save this for another time because it's going to get a little spiteful right now, but oh fuck it. You know
Kid
that
show.
Gerard Mayo is going to be the one trying to say, oh, this wasn't my roster, this wasn't my players. Elliot Wolf was the one that picked it, and Robert Kraft is going to say, "Well, I can't have Mayo be the one to be the scapegoat because I fired the greatest head coach that ever lived, and said that this was my successor that I had in place for 5 years, which is also insane because like, he hired him without having coached a single football game his entire life. Like,
I need to go back. I was meaning to do this week and I just didn't have time. But I wanted to see when was Mayo actually hired as an assistant coach? Was it before this Israel trip or was
I
this
think it was
something that
afterwards.
I don't
I
know to
don't
be
even
honest.
think he was. I think they were saying he wasn't even on the coaching staff at that point.
Oh, he wasn't?
I think he was an Optum guy at that point and was a former player,
Okay.
which is why he went on the trip.
Okay, I kind of remember. So
Hmm.
that's what I was planning on looking up. But again, like you said, it's going to be pointing at Wolf, essentially saying that Wolf is the one that constructed the roster. And then I think it's fair to criticize Wolf too, because offensive line is the biggest issue. Left tackle is the biggest issue. And you
Hmm.
go into the season with you draft your biggest free agent signing is a right tackle who's been in the NFL for 4 years and has never played left tackle. You draft a offensive tackle who in 4 years played right tackle, never played left tackle, and you go into the season with Rodarian Lowe as your starting left tackle. Like
Hmm.
that is just
And
a
it's
fireable
not to say
offense.
that he had no idea what was going on. He was here the
Yeah,
whole time that this
exactly.
happened.
And,
He
and
was,
it's one thing if you think those two guys that you brought in, they have the capabilities of playing left tackle, but you didn't play them entirely at left tackle all camp. Okafor, again, he didn't play well in the first game. He didn't play well in the last preseason game, but most of preseason and camp, he was playing at right tackle, which is what he's done his whole
mhm.
career. It's unfair to him and didn't put him in the situation to succeed by having him at right tackle and then just expecting him, oh, on 2 weeks' notice, you're going to play left tackle now. So
Mhm.
it's one thing too if you went into that was your plan to bring these two guys in, and maybe you had high hopes on Vidarian Lowe, and you think out of those three, one of them will emerge as the favorite, but that's not what they did.
Yeah. No, agreed. And
Oh,
it's,
and two, the one thing I wanted to say before I went on the
mhm.
tangent was you're already starting to see the finger pointing where Tom Curran, who was vying for Mayo to become the head coach, he's already starting to put the blame everywhere else but Mayo. Where after the Jets game, our dad had the NBC Sports Boston show on, and I was listening to see what would Curran say about Mayo because that was just horrendous coaching, horrendous all the way around. And he pretty much just blamed Elliott Wolf for constructing the roster, Peters for the offensive line, and AVP, but he did not once talk about Mayo. So you're
Mhm.
already starting to see the finger pointing, trying to lay the groundwork to, oh, shift blame to other people. Again, it's still early. Again, it's a 4-win team from last year. So it's not to say it's realistic to expect Rod Mayo was to come into the season and then win 9, 10, 11 games, even though he said before the season that we're going to win more than 4 games. I guarantee you that, quote unquote. But you're going on from the greatest coach of all time to someone new that's never coached, never been a coordinator. So we're expecting growing pains. So again, don't want to harp on it too much. It's still early for Rod Mayo. Not to say that he's going to be one and done, two and done, three and done. He might end up becoming a great coach. We really don't know.
So with that. Jacoby Brissett, any thoughts on him quick before we kind of go on? I think we can
He
get,
he processes the field very slowly.
mhm.
He just stays on his number one read and then goes slowly to two, then slowly to three. It's great that he's not forcing any turnovers, which if Mac was this quarterback this year, you probably would already have 10 interceptions with three pick sixes and then 15, 20 sacks and forced fumbles. So he's at least not turning the ball over. He's getting crushed and getting back up. I think every single game there were about 3, 4 times where he got hit. And I was like, okay, he's done. It looks like May's coming in because it looked like he was in severe pain.
Mhm.
And I have to give him credit for taking those hits and getting back up. And I think part of it too is he knows if he doesn't get up and go back in, he's
He's
never
never going
playing
back
again.
in.
Yeah.
And he's tough though. Just
Yeah.
I really appreciate how tough he is
Yep.
being there. And you know how tough he was going to be just from when he was a rookie, where he
Yeah.
played a game with a torn ligament on his thumb, couldn't even throw the ball
Because
because
Jimmy
Jimmy
G was a bitch.
Garoppolo. Yeah. So
And you wanted Jimmy G as your quarterback this year instead of Jacoby Brissett. How would the team be looking with Jacoby now?
no, I
I'm
wanted
with
Baker
Jimmy.
Mayfield to be the quarterback this year.
I told you that was unrealistic.
It's not
If Jimmy
unrealistic.
G was the quarterback, how would this team be?
He was suspended the first game, so he wouldn't even be playing. It'd be Joe Milton. But actually, probably Bailey Zappi at that point. But
He probably would have gone on IR after the first preseason game. Yeah, you're right.
um,
It probably would have been Zappy. Oh God.
yeah. Um, and you kind of saw what Mac did the other night, where
Yeah.
that was one of the funniest fumbles that I've seen from
Yeah.
him. Again, Brissett, he's very slow at reading the field. Like I haven't seen I haven't seen a quarterback for them, I guess, because we haven't had anyone that terrible. Kind of processing. I think
Zappy.
No, even Zappy, at least he would go in for his reads and
Zappy
just
was
chuck the ball
faster, but
up.
I'd say Jacoby's better quarterback.
He's a better quarterback, but I'm just saying, like, overall processing speed. I haven't seen someone that
Okay.
slow,
Yeah,
like,
that's fair.
ever
Yeah.
play for them. And maybe there's been opposing quarterbacks. I haven't really focused on just the reads and that when watching them on like opposing quarterbacks when the
Yeah.
Patriots on defense. But he is definitely the slowest processor they've had that I've ever watched.
Yeah.
And just the amount it takes him to go from one read to two reads is really slow. And even the difference between him and Mac was insane too. But
Yeah.
he also doesn't make mistakes, but he also doesn't make mistakes because he doesn't really take any risks or he doesn't really make any throws other than his first read. So he's getting sacked. So the thing about him is, and I think we'll get into that also in the questions
Yeah.
around the league about when May should play
Yeah.
because I think they'll kind of be relate to the Daniels situation.
Yeah.
All right.
One stat with the offensive line and Brissett that we tweeted out, but just wanted to bring it up. We've talked about this over the past few years, especially with the offensive line being bad, that a high pressure rate is pretty much considered anything above 30 to 35. Very high is considered 40% or higher. This last game versus the Jets, the hit rate, not pressure rate, the amount of the hit rate was 65% of dropbacks. That is absolutely insane. Just unfathomable. That's just something that you can't,
It
that's
can't
not
be done in the
sustainable.
NFL. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's you're gonna get him killed. You're gonna get May killed, and then Joe Milton when he comes in
Yeah.
will save the day. All right, defense. Not really anything great there either.
Yeah.
I think I'll want to start on the coaching and then get into the players from there on out. I think really poor coaching that you see, especially in the Jets game. You
Yeah.
saw it to start in the Seahawks game where they're making mistakes that they haven't made before, where they're not setting the edge
Yeah.
and they're losing containment and they're rushing past the quarterback and they're not making tackles. They're not finishing on tackles. They're not wrapping up. They're not jamming receivers. They're actually playing on Patriot style scheme where they're playing a lot of zone coverage and a lot of off man coverage where
Yeah.
they're 5 to 10 yards off the guy and playing
Even
this
more.
passive
Like there
style.
were so many times in the Seattle game where you could see it from the 300
Hmm.
level
Yeah.
section where we were at. And then even on TV a little bit in the Jets game too, where it's second and five, third and five. The Seahawks or the Jets need 5 yards, and the cornerbacks are 10 to 15 yards off.
Hmm.
They just do a 5 yard curl and get a first down.
Yeah. And you can't do that against Aaron Rodgers
Yep.
because Aaron Rodgers, he's not as good as Brady, but he's like Brady where he gets in they had him in shotgun. They had him five wide, basically four wide, and then they have the running back end up going out into the flat. And he would pick apart, he would know where the zone is, and he would know where the soft spot in the zone is and target it. It's the
Yep.
easiest. That's why the Patriots always did well against the Steelers defense,
Yep.
because the Steelers ran the same exact thing where they had this zone coverage and they would just find the soft spot in the zone, they would hit it, and they would get over 300 yards a game against the Steelers. It's the same exact thing what the Jets did to the Patriots, and it's you can't do that against an elite quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. You
Yep.
cannot play that type of zone coverage and think you're going to get away with it. It's basically trying to play scared, saying, we know you're going to beat us and just don't beat us too much. And then
Yep.
we'll give you 5 yard plays each time. So that way you don't hit a deep pass on us. And that way we lose 24-3 rather than 54-3.
Yep.
Um, and it was just a really bad scheme. And I think just the fundamentals you're seeing that you wouldn't see on a Patriots defense. And it would be interesting to see how is Gerard Mayo going to hold these players accountable because he wants to be a players coach. Is he going to hold them accountable? If any of these players were making the mistakes under Bill, they'd be benched. Even Mondre would be benched after the second fumble, let
Yep.
alone the third. So how are they going to be holding these players accountable where this is unpatriot like defense? You would think we thought we were going to see a drop in their performance just because you're losing both Bill and Steve.
Yep.
I didn't think it was going to look like this going because we both like Covington. He's never
Yep.
called a play though. And we thought that
And
Mayo
him
at
and
least
Gerard never game planned either.
yeah. I know Mayo was the one that would address the room, so maybe he would have gotten some of that from kind of osmosis,
Yep.
even though Steve and Bill were the one game planning. How is it going to work there? It doesn't really seem like they learned as much from it, but It'll
It's
be
still
interesting
early
to
too.
see.
They played well against Cincinnati. Granted, Cincinnati hasn't been good this year,
Hmm.
but and they also had the same game plan from a couple of years ago, but it's just kind of starking. And then I don't know if you caught this during the TV or on TV, but after halftime, when the reporter asked Gerard his thoughts of like the Jets game, one thing that he said that just stuck out to me was he didn't say we need to coach better or we all have to do a better job. He says the players have to play better.
Hmm.
And that, like, again, the players didn't play great, especially on the defensive side of ball. But I thought most of the issues from the first half started with either A, the players aren't good enough, especially on the offensive line, or B, the coaching was just horrendous.
Yep. And then Covington kind of repeated the same thing in his one of the kind of Q&As that he had after the game. I think it was on Monday maybe or Tuesday
Yeah.
this week. And he was saying it wasn't a scheme issue. It wasn't that we were out coached. It's just that we got that we didn't play New England Patriots defense. We didn't tackle. We didn't have all these things. But I'd
Which
say
to an
you're
extent they
right.
didn't
To
tackle,
extent
but
they didn't tackle. They had very sloppy tackling. They weren't setting the edge. But then again, they had a poor scheme against it, and the coaching should be the ones coaching them to not do this. And if you're
yeah.
not doing it, how are you going to kind of prevent that? Are you going to take them out? Are you going to bench them during the game saying this isn't working? You're not doing it the right way. If you lose containment and you don't set the edge and you run past the quarterback, you're out. And Uche did that. Uche, now he goes by Uche now. Did that multiple times in the game, and there's a reason why he lost snaps last year as well because it's kind of the same problem overall. And how are they going to kind of handle that? Are they going to kind of teach him a lesson? Are they going to just let it happen? It'll be kind of interesting to see. All right. So Keon White, Jonathan Jones, some good players overall from that. I don't really think anything other to say than what we expected out of
Yeah.
it. Keon White
Yeah.
is a
Keon was
beast,
great.
and
I know he was hard on himself saying he played like crap.
mhm.
But the one thing that just stuck out with me was, I mean, it's always been this way with him the past couple of years, but just the effort he puts in every single play. Yeah, he didn't have any sacks. So it wasn't a great night from that perspective, but I still remember there was one time where he was rushing Rodgers and then was going for the sack, almost got it. Rodgers threw it away or got it out to the receiver or the wide receiver or the running back on a bubble. I forgot which one. And then this was around the 6 to 8 yard line where Keon was. Keon ends up making the tackle at the 30 yard line
Mhm.
or 35 yard line. He ran 35 yards up the field after rushing Rodgers to make the tackle. I know he's fast, but still for a defensive lineman to put in that effort after rushing the quarterback is just impressive. And he's someone that I'm hoping he continues to improve week in, week out and continues with this attitude, which I think he will, and
Mhm.
hoping he just stays on this defense for the years to come.
Yeah, and one other thing just to mention with him is that someone was reporting, I can't remember who it was, that during the game, during the Jets game, they could see him yelling at players that weren't doing the right thing, and they were making the mistakes on the line to try and correct it after it happened. So it's nice to see that he's trying to coach on the field as well and take that more of a leadership role, especially since Juron's gone.
Yep.
It'll be it's kind of great to see that happen there. Three up, three down. Kind of hard to get the three up,
Yep.
and be interesting to see our kind of players there. So I'll go Bryce Behringer, Pop Douglas, Marcus Jones. Behringer was his punts are just something to watch. They're
Yeah.
beautiful. The
Yep.
fifth he's had a 50-yard punt, I think in the last
20
20
straight games,
straight games.
which
Um,
again isn't great because that means you're punting a lot, so you have more
mhm,
opportunities. But
yeah. But he kind of flips the field position, and there was just one punt in the Seahawks game
I just
that he
realized that
hit.
he's had a 50-yard punt every single game of his career then.
Yeah,
Last year he was a rookie and they played 17 games. They
17,
played
3 games. Yeah.
three.
There was one punt he made against the Seahawks where it was a long it was gotta be it had to be close to like 60 yards at that point,
Probably.
the way he hit it. He hit it perfectly out of bounds too, so they couldn't return it. He
Yep.
just a great punter. Pop, he finally kind of showed they worked a lot of things open for him this game. So glad to see that. Marcus Jones has really been playing really hard. So I don't know if this is just Jets overall, but I'm just gonna say the last kind of two games. and he's really shown he's been covering really well. He's been tackling. He's not the biggest guy at all. He's really small, and he plays a lot bigger than he actually is.
Yep, agreed. So mine's very similar. I had Bryce Barringer number one. I mean, he's been your biggest weapon the last 2 years, I guess. Pop Douglas number two, and then a little interesting, Joe Cardona number three. No bad snaps, and then also they had 5 punts versus the Jets, and then he had one tackle and was in position to make another tackle as your long snapper. Again, I don't know if that's great to for the rest of the special teams unit where your long snapper is the one that's making the tackle or being in position. But Justice Hustle, he's a captain for a reason. He's been here a while, so it's great to see that he continues to play well, which is good for me too because he's one of the two active Patriots I have a jersey for. So I want him around a little longer.
All right, three down. I won't really go in depth with this because we talked about all of these in general, but offensive
Yeah.
line, coaching staff, the entire coaching staff, and then the entire defense.
Yeah, mine's almost identical, slightly different order. Mine's entire coaching staff, entire offensive line, and entire defense minus Keon White.
All right. So questions around the league. Why are we seeing bad football?
I think there's several reasons. One, I think with the CBA, the 2011 CBA, how they started reducing the amount of practices you can have, reducing the amount of training camp. That's why you started to see where the first 3 to 4 games is essentially an extension of the preseason. So because of that, team players aren't really working on the fundamentals of tackling because you can't really tackle. Because wide receivers, quarterbacks aren't able to get on the same page because you don't have as many practices. So I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is I think we're starting to see a reduction in quality quarterback play. So I know there's a bunch of there's Mahomes who's still great. I know his numbers haven't been great the past 7, 8 games, but you do have quarterbacks like Herbert, like Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, playmakers like that. But overall, I'd say the bottom 20, 25 in the NFL is much worse the past few years than it was, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Like your top 3 to 5 still might be good. I don't know if it's the same as like Brady, Rogers, Breeze era, but I think from 4 to 10 isn't as good as it was then, and then even below isn't as good as then. And then I think we're also seeing more and more worse head coaches. So I think that's a big issue too, where because you don't have good coaches, you're not seeing the fundamentals being taught appropriately. You're not seeing good schemes being implemented. And because of that, traditionally, you might see a lot of more mediocrity because you don't have great coaches that are taking advantage of bad coaches. So, for instance, Bill traditionally would always eat up essentially terrible coaches that he's playing. Um, you could say, I'd say Andy Reid's still a great coach, but you don't have the Pete Carrolls, you don't have the what's his name, the guy from the Steelers, Bill Cowher. You're seeing more and more inexperienced young head coaches than even good coaches from before that are experienced. You're seeing a lot of 25 or 35, 36, 37-year-old coaches, 40-year-old coaches with much more inexperience compared to what you had before, where even if it's not a great coach, they were still coaching in the coaching realm for 15 years or so before they got a head coaching job.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the biggest one is the CBA, where they're just not
Yeah.
having enough time,
Yeah.
where they can't practice as much. No one's playing in the preseason anymore, and they're not getting as much training camp time, not as much practice time. They just can't develop things, and that's why the Patriots offense, I think, had so much issues towards the end, where with the um, why am I blanking on the Earnhardt Parker scheme? It needs a lot of kind of practice and rep, and when
Yeah.
you have guys that you can't kind of practice that with, it doesn't work to its kind of benefit there. And you got people that are running things that they don't know, where a lot of it is changed at the line, and if no one understands what that change is, it's not going to work. The next bigger thing I think is the coaching. I think the coaching is what kind of controls the quarterbacking, where
Yeah, that's fair.
they can't implement, they can't have a good situation for the quarterback to go in, and they can't teach them and develop them well, where we see a really bad offensive line pretty much everywhere now.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a bad offensive line, and that's kind of coaching, and that's also because of the time that they have. And then what they're trying to put on the quarterbacks, where a lot of people are itchy to kind of move on from quarterbacks really quickly now and not give them the time or the kind of the situation to kind of thrive in there. Um, and that's why I think you kind of see some of these other quarterbacks kind of popping up on their second, third round stints, where you see Sam Darnold and you see Justin Fields. I think Fields may be a little bit more of a mirage, but
Yeah.
that those sorts of things
Baker
where.
Mayfield.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then they're just kind of itchy to kind of move on and draft someone really high. Well, drafting someone really high doesn't always work. And people, I think, are being overdrafted now because they're afraid of
Yeah.
missing out on the next Patrick
100%.
Mahomes, where they say Mahomes, what, 10,
9.
or 13, 9,
9.
9, wherever he went. This many teams passed them. Why did they pass him? Well, we can't go passing someone with a physical talent like that. So we need to draft them. That's why you see Anthony Richardson getting drafted at number 3, I think, or
Yeah, number
4
3.
overall. And then you see
Number 10. Mahomes was 10.
yeah,
Sorry.
Mahomes 10. That's why you see Anthony Richardson being drafted number 3 overall.
Yeah.
That's why you see Trey Lance being drafted number 3 overall. You see people trying to say, well, they
Zach
have that
Wilson, number
physical,
2.
they have those physical skills. They could be the next Patrick Mahomes. We need to draft them right here, even though they don't have this, this, and this. And I think you're seeing a lot of players that are drafted way higher than they should be.
Yeah.
I think
Even
those are the
this
big
this past
things.
year, again, not saying that these players aren't going to pan out, but you saw 6 quarterbacks taken in the first 12 picks. Where if this was, say, 5, 6 years ago, I don't know if
Would
Bo
Bo
Nix
Nix
is a
be
first round
taken?
pick.
Would Michael
He's
Penix be
probably
taken?
he's probably a second round pick like Derek Carr was in that
hmm
realm. Michael Penix, maybe a late first round pick because of his talent, but the injury risk.
hmm
JJ McCarthy, probably late first round pick. Drake May.
You could even argue Drake May wouldn't have been a first round pick 5 to 6 years ago, based off of
I think he still would
everything.
have. I think his talent was there before the season, and he's projected
hmm
to be a top 2 pick. And then he just didn't have a great year because of his surrounding cast. I think maybe the Jaden Daniels one, and he did have a great year, but maybe he doesn't go all the way up to 2. But
hmm
I still think Drake May and Caleb would be top 3 picks.
Yeah. All right. Next one. What's wrong with Jacksonville?
Everything. It's Jacksonville. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is as good as he was made out to be. Again, I don't know if it's he doesn't have the processing of defenses, if he just doesn't have the not motivation, but if he's not putting in the right amount of work. Again, I have no idea. I don't follow Jacksonville. I don't know what they're saying about him, what he actually does in the building. I'm just trying to think of what could it be. I mean, they try to improve their offense this year. They got what was his name? They got Calvin, correct? Or did Calvin went to Jaguars?
Calvin left.
Oh, he
Calvin went
left
to the
Jaguars.
Titans.
He
Yeah.
went to Titans, sorry. But they got Brian Thomas. They tried to improve their team and it just keeps not doing well. It's still early. They still can make the playoffs. I know it's unlikely, but 6 teams have made the playoffs after starting 0-3. Last one was the 2018 Houston Texans. So it's not great. I really don't know. They were a playoff team 2 years ago where they won and made it to the second round, partially because Brandon Staley was the opposing coach. But they have talent on the roster. It's just I have no idea.
Yeah.
I
No, great.
and Doug Peterson is a Super Bowl winning head coach, so it's not like he's a bad coach, but maybe he's not the right coach for that situation or environment.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think the biggest thing would just be Trevor Lawrence isn't what everyone tried to claim he was going to be. This generational talent where he's a turnover machine, and that hasn't stopped since he's gotten in the league.
Yeah,
You would think that would have gotten better as he's gotten older, and he just keeps doing it and doing it and doing it, and has a ton of turnovers. And you end up paying him over $200 million when he hasn't been great.
yeah.
So I think that's where the situation where
Which
they're
is what
afraid.
you would have had to pay Mac Jones if Mac Jones had at least an average year last
hmm
year. Again, it depends who's making the decision. Is it Bill? Is it Kraft?
hmm
Maybe they don't do it. Maybe Kraft doesn't want to have that much money coming out of his pocket. Maybe Bill doesn't want to sign Mac Jones because he doesn't think he's worth it. Again,
hmm
it's ultimately for the Patriots' success. It's ultimately good that Mac Jones showed who he really was last year. But
hmm All right. Who's going to be the first coach fired this year?
I'd say Doug Peterson.
I said Doug Peterson too.
Maybe Stefanski.
I was
But
between Peterson and Stefanski. I ended up just going with Peterson because that there's more of a recent precedent with the Jaguars moving on from someone in year. But I guess the Browns have done
yeah,
it before in the
that's a
past.
different situation though. Urban Meyer was
Yeah.
horrendous,
Hmm.
but I think I could definitely either one. Yeah, I think it just depends on how
It's
each
got to be
team
one of the
does.
two just based on the quarterback because you could with Watson, you're paying him a ridiculous amount of money, and Stefanski hasn't gotten it out of him.
Yeah,
And Lawrence, you're paying him a ridiculous amount of money, and he was the number one overall pick.
yeah,
So one of those two, I think, is going to be gone
yeah.
before the end of the year.
Jacksonville's in a worse division per se than Cleveland, so they might get some wins versus a
Hmm.
terrible uh, Colts team. They might get some wins when Will Levis throws them the ball. Um, Whereas the Cleveland has a tough opponents. They have the Steelers that are 3-0. They have the Ravens. They have the Bengals. Bengals are 0-3, but still, I think a lot of us still think the Bengals are a good team. So
Hmm.
maybe because of that, it ends up being Stefanski just because they might have a worse record at, say, week 12, week
Hmm.
15.
All right, is Daniels the real deal?
I think it's too early to say. We see this a lot with mobile quarterbacks when they come in the league. We saw it with Robert Griffin. We saw it with Kaepernick, Lamar. Lamar and Cam are two of the few, and Mike Vick that have done it. But a lot of rookie quarterbacks, if you're that fast, it takes, especially this early on in the season where you're fast and tackling isn't great.
Hmm.
I think we still have to wait some time. I think he definitely can be the real deal, but I think it's just too soon to say.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think it's too soon to say. I think he was one of the most pro-ready ones to come into the league. Him and Bo
Yeah,
Nix.
he was
He
a
played
five-year
what
starter.
6 years, 5 years.
5-year starter.
And he has, I think, probably the best mechanics out of all of the players. He throws a really nice ball.
Yeah.
And it's still crazy seeing how fast he is because you never really know in college how fast the guy is because you're playing against college guys. Watching him against NFL talent and how fast he is,
Yeah.
um, is just is kind of crazy. He's not as good of a runner as Lamar Jackson, um, but he's I think a better thrower than he is from what we could see right now. The my biggest thing with Daniels was his size, where
Yeah.
he looks he always looks skinny in college. He looks skinny against the NFL players.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and is he going to be able to hold up a full season running the way he does? He did start sliding a lot more last game.
yeah.
So I'm really kind of happy to see that, and that will help protect him. But are there going to be the times when his instinct gets in the way where he doesn't slide and gets hit hard and gets hurt there?
Yeah.
It's really hard to keep that body up. And you look at Lamar Jackson, he's much bigger than Daniels is,
Same with Cam Newton
and
too.
Cam Newton, and they still end up getting hurt. So how is
Yeah.
Daniels going to be able to hold up to that?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up too, is how he looks small compared to what he was in college. I thought the same thing with Drake May when he went in the
Hmm.
game versus the Jets, where in college, again, he wasn't in the SEC. He was in, I think,
The
UNC's and
ACC.
the ACC.
Hmm.
But he looked like a Josh Allen type player
Hmm.
there. But when he came into the field versus the Jets, he didn't look like Josh Allen. He looked skinny, like a tall, skinny type quarterback. He didn't look like someone that can take those big hits and run through people.
Hmm. No, agreed. I think I thought that even during preseason, I was surprised how I thought
Yeah.
he'd look bigger. The one thing about Daniels, I'm do one real quick because we're running along, is a lot of people I think are going to say watching that game on Monday night that, well, if Daniels can do it, why can't May do it? And I
Yeah.
think the thing that we talked about being more pro ready is a huge thing. Where Drake May is 21 years old, I think 21 years old, and was playing in the ACC where you have Jaden Daniels who played for 5 years. He played in the SEC.
Played in
Um,
two different schemes too. He played
mhm,
at Arizona State and then he came over to the SEC too. So he's played good competition his whole career.
yeah,
Pac-12 and then SEC, and he's a 5-year starter. And
yeah.
Washington was holding up in protection when they were passing, probably because defenses have to contain because of his running threat per
Mhm.
se, but also he had clean pockets versus what May's going to have if he was to step in right now.
Yeah. And he's got I think a better offense coordinator
Yeah,
on hand and
the
someone that
the Cliff
knows how to
Kingsbury rejuvenation.
yeah, and I think it's someone that knows how to play to the strengths of Jaden Daniels, and I think
Yeah.
that's something with Drake May. I don't know if AVP has the skills to play to the strengths of Drake May, rather than trying to make him fit into the to his scheme. I think I you just see I think to see the difference between the kind of the two there. Um, with that. And I think the scheme really helps Daniels as well. He knows how to play that. He's coached in college before, so that's why he kind of knows how to bring that stuff in. And he's played with Kyler Murray too, and he's gotten a lot out of him there on offense. They didn't really do well
Yeah. Patrick Mahomes
overall
in
as a
college
team.
too.
Hmm. All right. And last couple questions. Are any of the 3-0 teams a fraud? So right now, Bills, Chiefs, Steelers, Seahawks, and Vikings are all 3-0.
I think it depends on how you define fraud. I don't think the Steelers are as good as their record indicates. I don't think the Seahawks are as good as their record indicates. I don't know if Sam Darnold's quarterback play can hold up the entire year. I think Bills and Chiefs are the real deal. I know the Bills were supposed to be in a rebuilding year per se this year with the looking forward to 2025, based on some of the decisions they made, but they're looking great so far. Chiefs are the Chiefs, but Steelers have a great defense. They have some playmakers on offense, some questions offensive line, but they're just not turning the ball over. Um, is that sustainable over the course of the next 14 weeks? I'd say no, given I still don't believe in Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. So I think they'll win some games just because they have a lot of talent on defense, but I don't think they'll make the playoffs. Seahawks, they're in a tough division. I think that Geno Smith has shown that he's much better quarterback than people thought a few years ago. They might make it in as a wild card team, but their division is so strong unless the 49ers and Rams keep getting injured and players stay injured the whole year. I don't know if I'd say they're going to win their division, even though they're 3-0 and the 49ers are 1-2. And then
Yeah, no,
Vikings, I think it's just too early to say on Sam Darnold if he's the real deal or not.
yeah. This one's a really hard question just because I think the Steelers are going to do better than some people expected by having Russell Wilson in Fields. I think they're playing the type of football that you're trying to play here at the Patriots, where you're
Yeah,
trying to have a good defense and rely on the
it,
run.
yep,
The thing with the Steelers is they have a much better offensive line than you. I think
yep,
it's ranked like 15th overall, so like an average one, but good enough for when you have a mobile quarterback.
yeah.
And you have a quarterback who can run and throw. I think still watching Fields, his processing looks a lot better. His motion to throw is still kind of long, which I don't like as much.
Hmm.
But they are playing better. I think they might sneak in the playoffs in like a wild
They
card
could.
spot. I
Their
don't think
defense
they'll
is
be like
legit.
a yeah. I don't think they'll be like a heavy top three team, but I can definitely see them hanging around there in the middle kind of playoff route where like near the middle to end. So
Yeah.
um I don't think anyone here is a truly fraud where they're going to end up being like really bad to end the year. But I
I
would
think
say
the
the
Steelers
Steelers,
can be if their defense starts getting hurt. I
yeah.
don't think their offense is sustainable for the entire year. Like you said, they
Mhm.
might squeak into the playoffs, but I could also see them not making the playoffs.
Yeah. And then Sam Donald is really just interesting just because I don't know about you, but I was really interested to see how he would play with the Vikings after
Yeah.
having that time off and then actually having time with the 49ers and working under Shanahan because I
And
always
having great
believe,
weapons with the
yeah, and having
Vikings
great
too.
weapons with the Vikings where you never really get to see out of Darnold what he would look like in a proper team where the Jets, he never had anything. The Panthers, that's a garbage organization right now. What can he actually do where he's really talented? He's got the arm strength, he's got the size, he's got a little bit of speed. And what could he do with that on a legit team? And I think you're maybe starting to see it. So it'll be interesting to see if he keeps it up. But
Yeah.
um, I really like kind of seeing him get that chance and seeing
Yeah.
what he can do with it. And kind of really excited because I've really always liked him. I actually kind of wanted the Patriots to not draft him, to trade for him
Yeah.
when the Panthers did
Yep.
at that
Same.
time because I thought that he would have been a viable option for them to be quarterback.
Yep. Agreed.
Um, all right, and will any of the 0-3 teams make the playoffs? Bengals, Titans, Jaguars.
I say Bengals will make the playoffs just because their track record and history shows that they get better
Mhm.
as the season goes on. Titans and Jaguars suck, so no chance.
Yep, agreed. You even saw the Bengals against the not the 49ers, the Commanders starting to play better as the game went on.
And they played the Chiefs very well. They should have beaten the Chiefs if it wasn't.
Yeah,
You could argue because of the refs, but they should have
yeah,
beaten the Chiefs. They really
yeah,
should be 1-2. They're not as bad as their record indicates.
yeah. No,
And
agreed.
if they didn't fumble on the half-yard line, they beat the Patriots too.
Too. Yeah. So they could have easily be 3-0. That Chiefs game, I don't think that was. I think that was a. Wait a minute.
That was pass interference,
That was
but
it was pass interference because I think he did hit him too early
yeah,
and there. I think the other pass interference call that wasn't called should have been pass interference
Yeah, that was
in
more
the
egregious, but
yeah,
yeah.
in the Falcons game. All right.
But I'm glad ultimately I was rooting for the Chiefs because I want the Falcons to suck.
I do too. So I want them to crash and burn. You could tell
Yeah.
that Bill is probably happy about that.
Yeah.
And all right, 49ers. We'll get into this quick. I think everyone kind of knows about them. Offense is their kind of bread and butter there. But they got some injuries there. So McCaffrey's out on IR because of his Achilles. Seeing a specialist in Germany. Debo and Kittle are questionable. Debo more likely is probably going to be out. He's doubtful right now. Kittle was limited. And then Juwan Jennings has really taken over. He was known, if you actually watch the Inside of the NFL with Belichick, Chad Johnson had him as his week one football guy for all he does. So if you watch that, you'll actually heard of him. Everyone else had no idea who the hell this guy was when he broke off
Yeah.
last week. And then Trent Williams, one of the best tackles in the league. And
The
then
best tackle in the league, one of the best tackles in NFL history.
yeah, and then Jordan Mason's filling in really well in the running back spot with
Yeah.
McCaffrey being out.
Yeah, no, they're a great offense, and as a football fan, I would have loved to see the Patriots versus a healthy 49ers offense. I know the Patriots had some issues. They had pass issues versus the Seahawks. They played like crap versus the Jets, but with a week and a half off, I was actually really looking to see how would this defense hold up versus a pretty elite offense. And it's unfortunate that McCaffrey's out. It's unfortunate Debo's out and Kittle's always hurt. As a Patriots fan, that's good news for them. It increases their likelihood of win or having a chance. Um, but you still have to, even with Debo out, even with McCaffrey out, Jordan Mason has shown to be a viable option. You still have Brandon Ayuk. Jawan Williams showed last week that he's a very viable wide receiver option.
Join Jennings,
Kit, what did I say?
Joan Williams.
Oh God. Sorry, John Jennings. George Kittle, when healthy, is a really good tight end. Again, we don't know if he's going to play, and they have the best fullback in the NFL. So love to see that as a football fan, as a James Devlin truther. Um, love to see a good fullback. And Kyle, I never know how to pronounce his last name, Jazuski. I don't know,
Yeah,
but they're going to be running at you. They're going to be probably run first, and then you can't really rely on either. You can't really rely on just fully stopping the run, or because then they'll throw to Ayuk and Jennings and Kittle, or if you try taking them all out, they'll just run down your throat with Mason. They'll be running behind Trent Williams. So I'm interested to see from a matchup perspective how Keon White does if he's going up against Williams, just because it's a really good measuring stick for White going up against the best tackle in the NFL.
yeah. It'll be really interesting, I think, to see their defense. How are they gonna not break containment? Are they gonna
Yeah.
set the edge on their team? Because it is vital against especially the 49ers offense to do that. Any
Yeah.
West Coast scheme it is, but especially against the 49ers and how well they run things there. Is really key there. Defense, you got Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. They're two best players, I think, on defense. So it's going to be a little bit harder. Well, it's going to be harder in general because the pass rush is going to be is
Yeah.
going to probably be there still. Especially with Nick Bosa. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of attack him and what are they going to do. If it was Belichick, you know that he would have two guys accounting for Bosa.
Yeah.
What are they going to do there? Are they going to put a tight end in the chip? Or are they going to put an extra offensive lineman out there? Do they actually call up the guy from the practice squad that's 6'9", 300 something pounds and have use him as a third tight end a lot
Yeah.
to kind of help protect? Where you don't have to worry about his footwork as much if he's not playing like left tackle, but he's playing tight end. You kind of use him to run behind, extra
Yeah.
body, that sort of thing. And then Nick Sorensen's their new DC. Brandon Staley is the assistant head coach, but he's helping out on defense as well. We kind of know how we feel about him, but any other thoughts about that defense before we get into predictions?
Not really. It's going to be an interesting matchup. Patriots offense hasn't been able to show really anything this whole year, and defense has been inconsistent. Really great week one, great against the run week two, terrible against the pass week two and week three. So who's really going to show out? I know against the run two this past weekend, towards the end of the Seattle game, they were out without Jawan Bentley. They're without Christian Barmore. How are they going to do this week with your probably your two best run stuffers out of the game? I mean, Barmore's likely out for the year, but you're going to have to rely more on McMillan. You're going to have to hope that probably play Duggar in the box a little more. Keon White, Godshow, etc. So it's going to be interesting to see how they hold up.
All right. All right. So predictions: Patriots are 10-point underdogs in this one.
The
Over
first,
under.
the first double-digit underdog in the NFL this season.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I thought there was one week one. All right. Over under 40 and a half. I've got the 49ers winning 31-10. I think that they ended up losing last week. I think this is gonna be a get right game for them. Patriots are going across the country to play them. It's always hard going from one end to the other. It's usually harder on the West Coast teams going to the East Coast, but still
Yeah.
long flight, long road trip. And I think you're gonna see. I don't think it's gonna be as well, it's fine. It's not a great score. I don't think it's going to look as bad as the Jets game, but it's going to feel as bad, I think,
Yeah. No,
if that makes any
I agree.
sense.
I have the Patriots losing 38-13. Like you said, 49ers are 1-2. I still think they're one of the best teams in football. You could argue maybe the best. I know they are dealing with some injuries, but overall they're still pretty stacked throughout. Um, I think with them being 1-2, this is going to be their get right week. Even though the Patriots essentially had a mini bye, which should help them. Also with Debo likely being out, with McCaffrey out, that should help them as well. But I just think the 49ers are going to be too much, both on offense and on defense for this team. So 38-13. Hope I'm wrong. Hopefully, Patriots are able to make adjustments, work on the fundamentals, are able to tackle this week, have a good scheme for the 49ers offense, find a way to force some turnovers where Patriots defense is supposed to be great. They haven't forced a single turnover this season through 3 games. Patriots offense hasn't turned the ball over much though, other than Mondre's fumble. Actually, there was one fumble they forced again. There was the fumble versus Cincinnati, but no
Yep.
interceptions. That one forced fumble that they took. But they on offense they haven't turned the ball over. Hopefully that continues, or they haven't thrown interceptions. They fumbled, but hopefully that continues as well, where you're not giving the other team as many options or as many opportunities. So we shall see.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to subscribe and review, and look forward to see what the Patriots do against the 49ers. We may or may not have an episode next week just based on some scheduling kind of conflicts that we have. But if we don't have one next week, we'll be back at it the following week, and then kind of continue on weekly from there on. I don't think we should have any issues after that. So thank you again, and look forward to talking to you guys next time.